Hey everybody, so Age of Wonders 4 has recently started to put out developer diaries for their upcoming Archon Prophecy DLC. The first one is going to be on the Architects, the new culture coming out with that DLC. So I thought it would be a fun thing for me to read through this, and I thought it would be fun for you guys to listen to me reading through it. Before I go over it, there's probably two questions you have. Number one, what is a dev diary? Number two, what is Archon Prophecy? So dev diaries were popularized by Paradox Interactive. That's the publisher of Triumph Studios who makes Age of Wonders 4. They're not actually the Triumph Studios isn't actually a Paradox developer. Paradox publishes for them. There's a lot of developers who, for Age of Wonders, for Europa Universalis 5, Hearts of Iron 4, those are games directly developed under Paradox, but Triumph Studios is published by Paradox. Slight difference. Well, actually a pretty big difference right there. At any rate, Paradox Interactive, they did a lot of dev diaries for like the last decade on all their games, and they're pretty popular. Generally once a week, they go over a lot of features from new DLC or reworks coming in patches, anything cool about the game. It's really good for generating hype amongst the player base, for keeping excitement about the game, for getting feedback. And you've probably noticed a lot of other games doing developer diaries because it's just really popular. It takes a bit of time to do, sure, once a week you have to have a developer commit their time to doing it, but I think it's just really good for keeping the energy, the fervor of a game afloat. What is Archon Prophecy then? Well, Archon Prophecy is a new DLC for Age of Wonders 4. If you're wondering what Age of Wonders 4 is, I wonder why you even clicked on this video. You just must really like the sound of my voice. At any rate, Age of Wonders 4 is a video game. Archon Prophecy is a DLC for that video game. Most of the DLC for Age of Wonders 4 are more like big expansions than just small little DLCs. They do tend to, I think they do 2, maybe 3 a year. I think that's about it, like 2 to 3 a year. And again, these are more like big expansions. Having worked behind the scenes at the very least in making videos to go over the content in their expansions, there's a lot more content in each expansion than maybe a lot of people realize, and the quality and professionalism that goes into them is pretty high. I think Triumph Studios is a bit of an older developer who they definitely seem to value promptness a bit more. Like 90% of games these days, all their releases always tend to be, well, buggy, feel a little bit rushed. Triumph Studios, these big expansions tend to not be rushed and tend to have a very high quality mark on them, which I do appreciate. And I guess I am spending a bit of time here just hyping them up. That's because I just appreciate them. And as a guy who's kind of a professional hater, I make videos and half of them are just hating on games. Triumph Studios, they make a niche little game. It's not the most popular game ever, for sure, but it's a niche little game. They know what people want in their niche little game, and they definitely bring their A game. They don't phone anything in. They definitely bring their A game each expansion. Their expansions tend to be a little bit more expensive, which I have heard some complaints about, but there's just a lot in these, and they do work pretty hard on them. So with all that hyping I just did for Triumph Studios aside, what's actually then in Archon Prophecy? So this is of course coming out on August 12th, if you're wondering. This will include the new culture. Now, Age of Wonders 4, when it first launched, their cultures maybe weren't the most complicated. Over time, they've done a lot of reworks for free for some of the base game cultures, and a lot of their new cultures are beginning increasingly complicated. The Architects seems to pretty much follow suit with that, in that it's just getting more and more, I shouldn't say it's not like overly complicated, but it's about as complicated as some of the more complicated cultures in the game, and it has some really cool things in it. So we got the new culture, which I will go over later, so there's no real point going over it now. 2 new forms. Forms are just aesthetic. These are orcs, elves, dwarves, humans. You can put any trait on any form, but this is just 2 different ways you can make your faction look, which I think most people always appreciate, just because, well, it's just more diversity, right? We have new narrative content, prophecy traits, new society traits that help you shape your empire. Those will probably have a dev diary later that we'll go over. We have new story realms. We have 4 new tomes: the Tome of Virtue, the Tome of Prophecies, the Tome of the Revenant, and the Tome of the Archon. As you might imagine, 4 new tomes is a lot of new tomes, so you can see that this is definitely trying to be a very big expansion. We have a new hero class, the Battle Saint. I'm kind of looking forward to what they're doing with that one. I'm wondering if that's just going to be a combination of different classes, or if we're going to see a DLC hero class that's quite powerful. In particular, I'm wondering well, I mean, we'll get there when we get there. You know, I'm sure a future dev diary will go over it. I'll continue to do these videos on different dev diaries if they're popular, which does make me have to remind you guys, make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, make sure to leave a comment down below. That helps these videos out a lot. And generally, if these videos do well, I'll continue to make them. So yeah, we have 2 new celestial animals, 3 Archon representatives, 2 revenant Archons, 5 music tracks, 2 mounts, new interface skin, and several map updates. Blah, 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 right? Okay, so then what are the architects? Of course, this will be what the entire video from here on is this new culture. Architect who? I don't know the most about Age of Wonders lore. I should say that I don't know enough to speak confidently on it. I probably know more than most people watching this video, but not everyone watching this video. So for those few people who know more than me, I wouldn't want to look like a fool. So let's let the actual developers here writing this explain who they are. Architect who? The Archons were behind many of the great wonders you find around the realms. They did not build these alone. There were those who toiled in their name, and as the Archons moved on, the architects remained, building and forging in accordance to plans and designs passed down through the ages. These incredible creations are no matter of tradition and discipline. So the Archons are basically these former angels who helped create the realms. I'm not going to go into it more than that. And the architects were their creators. They were their people who actually forged the realms, right? Architects are a culture that create great monuments to the affinities, granting their people powerful boons and strengthening their ties to that affinity. And that seems to be the main theme about this culture going forwards, is that they are very diverse and can choose which affinity they specialize in. So in the past, cultures tend to be tied to one affinity, like Mystic will generally always have the blue affinity, Dark will have 2, Shadow affinity, etc., etc. The Architects, on the other hand, can pretty much choose any affinity to specialize in, which makes them actually a really good culture for having diversity and a really good culture for being able to do any build in them while also still using the culture themselves. We also have a cool picture here of the city of Akatamar, is a proud marvel of architecture in its own right. I will make sure to make this really annoying to listen to and mispronounce everything. You can thank me for that. You can. What do they do? The architect culture is adaptable, requiring planning for the long-term construction of monuments, but granting flexibility in their affinities and damage channels. And going forward, that is something that they emphasize a lot. The architects seem to very much be a late game culture. I think generally players of these sorts of games like being late game. It's always been weird to me. Games like this always seem to reward early game snowballing, in that you take over the early game. If you have a strong early game, then you just keep getting stronger and stronger and stronger over time, right? So often having an early game snowball will make you stronger late game than being a late game culture. But this one definitely seems to want to focus on, let's say, going tall. You know, we'll see more as they reveal more of it, but they definitely want to be like a culture that plays for the late game, builds up. I mean, that's literally the architects, right? And their big thing here is they get to choose which affinity. We've all 6 different affinities they start with. The architect chooses their culture starting affinity. Yeah, I mean, okay. Notably, the architect do not have an inherent affinity from their culture. Instead, when creating your architect faction, you can choose their initial affinity points from among the 6 affinities. The units are likewise adaptable, each having a partially hybridized unit role and matching their non-physical damage type to their dominant affinity, letting you lean into builds that make extended use of specific damage types, such as going full astral lightning and inflicting lots of lightning weakness. So as I explained it here, depending on which affinity you choose, you will get damage types based on, well, that affinity. Presumably, the order affinity will give you spirit damage. It's called spirit damage. It's always like faith damage or holy damage, or in this game it's spirit damage. It's like I have to remember, I play like all these different games and some of my brain's like, wait, what's it called in this game again? Chaos will give you fire, astral will give you lightning, materium will likely give you physical. Materium seems to be linked with physical, despite physical always being kind of weaker, but that's the way they do it. Nature will be tied to blight damage, and presumably shadow will be tied to... Wait, is there shadow damage in this game? Wait, shadow, blight, and am I not? Oh man, My brain. Okay, if there's a shadow damage, I'm going crazy. There's not a shadow damage, is there? No, is there? Okay, you know what? Pretend I definitely know what I'm talking about. Everyone just pretend I don't think there is a shadow damage. What would shadow be then? Oh man, I don't know. Most notably, the architects build monuments, but before we can lay down the first bricks, we must acquire a powerful building material, Wonderstone. Okay, so Wonderstone is going to be their new unique resource that they need to actually do their building. Presumably, this is to encourage the architects to actually go out and maybe play on the map and not just sit in their little hut and build tall and win the game by just corner camping. This game does have a lot of corner camping already, what with research. So they probably didn't want to like double down on that and then just have like you play a multiplayer match and everyone's just like corner camping with architects trying to play for late game, right? So Wonderstone, the surveyor is a useful scout, quick on their feet and with a keen eye for extracting Wonderstone. My brain can't read so good sometimes. You'll have to excuse me. So presumably their scout, even though they say he's quick on their feet, they just means a scout. Scouts move faster. And they're also saying here that the scout can extract Wonderstone. I'm going to presume that this works similarly to how industrial can survey mountains and stuff and get resources from that. I'm going to assume that their surveyor can then extract Wonderstone from a special ability by ending their turn on this stuff and, you know, pressing abilities, something like that. I'm going to assume that's how it works. Okay. A unique material created from the residue of magic materials via secretive methods. Wonderstone is used to lay the foundation of monuments and to build each tier upon them. Wonderstone can be obtained from magic material in two ways. Surveying provinces with magic materials is the quickest way to gain Wonderstone, but can only be done by your surveyors and only once per province. Yeah, okay. So you move your scout onto a province with a magical material, you take the Wonderstone off it, but you can only do that once. Okay, magic materials your empire owns grant some Wonderstone each turn, a slower source than surveying, but much more consistent. As this income is global, the source of the magic material is irrelevant, be they in annexed territory provided through vassals, trade agreements, or even synthesized using transmutation. So the more magic materials you have in your empire, the more you generate Wonderstone each turn. And they're saying you can get this in any way. They're not trying to restrict your gameplay. If you want to spam vassals, you get more. If you want to trade for it, you get more. If you want to throw down outposts everywhere, you get more. And if you want to go the Tome of Transmutation and just directly transmute magic materials, then you also get more. Although I guess I would question, if you can go Tome of Transmutation and make your own Wonderstone, then why didn't they just do that rather than relying on magic materials? Oh well, plot hole, maybe. While obtaining magic materials is vital to the architect culture's monuments, how you get them is up to you. Okay, monuments. What are monuments? This is the big thing about the architects. This is what separates them from the other cultures. This is what they're trying to do. They're trying to build these big monuments. Okay, each architect city may build a monument. This is done in a similar manner to other special province improvements. The first step is laying down the foundations. So you choose an affinity for each monument, and this dedication has a low minimum affinity requirement. Okay. Basically, if you have at least a little bit of affinity in an element, so, well, I shouldn't say element. If you have a little bit of affinity in an affinity, then you can build your monument on that. So you can't build an order monument without at least, presumably, one order, right? But then once you do build the monument, and I did read ahead here myself a little bit, once you do build the monument, then you get more of that affinity. So you can, if you have some, for example, shadow affinity, you can then build a shadow monument and get even more shadow affinity, which I believe they're the only culture that can just straight generate more affinity. Affinity is quite useful because it allows you to unlock more tomes. It allows you to move on your empire track a bit quicker. So being able to build these monuments and generate more affinity on them is quite powerful on its own. But in addition to that, you get, let's see, the foundation grants your units one stack of affinity encounter. This type is dependent on the affinity, blah, 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 blah. Basically, if we dedicated this monument to chaos, we would gain a stack of chaos incarnate, gaining +1 fire damage to all attacks, +2 for single shot attacks. Presumably, based on what they showed up here, this means that the monuments architects won't actually have any base buffs to their units within their faction, much like how feudal aristocracy can give like HP and XP generation, stuff like that. Barbarians give the bonus damage on crits. It doesn't seem like architects get many, because at least with the UI here, unless they're just not showing anything, they don't seem to get any real big base buffs for themselves, or any at all. And then once you get the monument, this is more so how you actually start getting these buffs, and you can stack pretty good buffs here. More interesting, perhaps, the foundation grants +1 of the monument's affinity. Yeah, okay, you get the affinity. The Sanctum. So once you build the foundation of the monument, you get the 1 affinity, your units do more damage, and then you build the monument up. You build it a tier 2, the Sanctum. The Sanctum grants an additional stack of affinity and the additional affinity as well as +20 city stability to the city. So now your units presumably will do more damage. Will they do more damage? Oh, no, apparently not. This foundation grants your units 1 stack of affinity incarnate. Well, they're not saying that you get more affinity incarnate. So you get 1 stack of affinity incarnate for building the foundation, but you don't seem to get another stack of affinity incarnate for increasing it to tier 2. Tier 2 just gives you city stability and then more affinity to your empire. Now, of course, affinity to your empire is pretty strong, but I'm wondering how then you get more of that infinity. How do we get more of this affinity incarnate? Well, maybe a tier 3. Maybe I should just read ahead instead of being silly here. So then once you upgrade the monument to tier 3, presumably the cost for upgrading it goes up and up and up. The foundation's the cheapest, then tier 2, then tier 3. Presumably the cost continues to go up. The Sanctum, that's tier 3, grants an additional stack of affinity incarnate of the infinity that the monument was dedicated to. So if I had read literally the next sentence, I would have understood. Okay. Oh, no, wait, no, this one says bringing us up to 3. So we would get affinity incarnate. So each tier of the monument you build gives you additional damage over and over and over. Presumably then, the architects are pretty weak in the early game, but as they build this monument, they're getting more and more and more damage, which is pretty strong. Yeah. So this would be 3 infinity incarnate, so it's 3 flat damage, 6 damage on single target shots, which, it's a pretty decent chunk of damage from your culture. Not the most, but, a pretty decent chunk. Okay. In addition, at tier 3, your units gain bonus resistance based on the monument's affinity. Thus, our Chaos Monument would grant +2 fire resist. So we would be getting city stability. We would be getting 3/6 damage, and we would now be getting resistance to that element as well. So tier 3, the monument does actually start giving us some pretty good buffs. The affinity gained increases again, so we get up to +3 chaos affinity potentially. And the city that owns this monument now gains +10% more food production and draft, accelerating its growth and development. So it's obviously going to be pretty good at making giga cities. Food production and draft, they're not that amazing, but I read down here, they do get 10% to everything down here. So once you finish the monument, it becomes the apex. Man, I'm reading this really poorly, aren't I? Please rate me 1 out of 10. I'm like a 1 right now. The apex represents the final step of the monument's construction. As with the previous tiers, it grants another affinity incarnate for a total of 4. The resistance bonus likewise increases at this tier. Thus, our Chaos Monument would be providing a solid +4 fire resist to our units. Ooh. So that's pretty good. I mean, 8 single shot damage and 4 fire resist would be pretty good, as well as buffing all resource generation from our city by 10% and 20 city stability. That's pretty good. Additionally, at tier 4, the monument counts as a gold wonder, letting you use these impressive structures as a way to attain magic victory by binding them as you would any other gold wonder. So that's pretty strong as well, because this allows you to turtle up in your faction a bit more, and then you don't need to go out into the world as much to get gold wonders. You have 1 in your base. You also get now a lot of damage and a lot of resistance and a lot of output from your main city. Presumably, you put this at your capital. Affinity effigies. Becoming available to build and architect cities that possess a tier 4 monument. This is a structure project that can be repeated. increasing in cost each time it's completed. Each completion, however, grants a city a hefty income boost of 20 food, 10 gold, and 10 mana. Enough to turn the heads of any magistrate, but even more impressive as it combines with the multiplier given by the monument itself. Well, I'd hope it would, because, I think I understand how maths, if you're producing more resources in your city and then you're multiplying those resources, yeah, I mean, that does track, that should work, right? So games in Age of Wonders 4 do end at some point. Obviously, there's like a bunch of win conditions you can get. So this does seem very strong at face value, but you also need to consider that if you get your monument all the way to tier 4 and then you're trying to do these affinity effigies, you might not have much time to rotate through them before the game just ends, or you might not have any time to do through them as an enemy just wins the game. So that is one thing to keep in mind for all these monument tiers and all that, is that by the time you build a tier 4, I mean, it depends on how hard it's going to be, it depends on how long it's going to be. By the time you build a tier 4, someone else might have just won the game. And it doesn't really do you a lot of good to be sitting there building up. If someone else just like does an expansion victory, takes a game, like you can go like, oh man, but look at me, I'm about to do something cool, like, cool, but you lost the game. So I just wanted to keep that in mind for everybody, that this does look very strong at face value, but they're probably trying to balance this around the fact that an enemy's just going to win the game if you spend too much time doing nothing. The cost. Monuments, however, are only impressive if they outdo the last. Thus, each time a monument tier is built, the cost of constructing another of that same tier increases significantly as they seek to outdo the competition with grander and grander projects. This practically means that as an architect empire, you may choose between building multiple lower tier monuments to varied affinities or dedicating to completing fewer monuments for the increased economic effects. Each monument requires a significant investment of structure production as well. Thus, prioritizing effective structure production is often a priority for architect cultures. So you can build multiple monuments, but what they're trying to explain here is that each monument will significantly increase the cost of the next monument. So you hypothetically can go infinite, and you can have 3 monuments giving you absolutely outrageous damage and bonuses, but you also need to remember that the cost is going to continue to go up as well. There is a finite amount of actual production you can get, because although this is food, gold, and mana, there's only so much production you can get in each city. So if each monument continues to cost more and more and more, with games ending conceivably around turn 80 to 110, there's only so much time you have before the game's going to end. So I don't know how many monuments you'll be able to get in a reasonable game, but it doesn't seem like they're trying to shoot for you to be able to get, like 5 of them, right? Like they don't, it doesn't seem like the idea is for each city to have a monument and then your units to be hitting enemies for like 40 bonus damage, right? So it does seem, you guys can kind of get the idea. I don't need to explain it any longer. Okay, so let's go over development. Okay, they're just explaining development here. A whiteboard full of chaos. Many more deleted takes and rewritten documents later. So just going over what they were trying to do, just a general idea, not really something I would bother going over here in this video at the very least. Getting this mechanic right has proven to be quite a challenge. No culture concept that I've worked on has gone through as many varied iterations as the architect. We wanted to have a culture that could represent the Archon indirectly and avoid adding another order-focused culture, which is definitely one thing the developers, they probably, after Harmony, realized that they added the Oathsworn faction, and it was pretty heavily focused on being another order faction. So they had order in feudal, then they had order in high, then they had order in Oathsworn, although Oathsworn did have the nature and the chaos variant. Even the nature one kind of felt like an order faction in their own way, and the chaos one was definitely very chaosy. But when I think Oathsworn, I'm mostly thinking of the order version of it. That seems to be what they focused a lot of the flavor on, right? So we wanted to have a culture that could represent the Archon indirectly and avoid having another order focused culture. Thus we focused instead on what the Archons created and made a culture themed around those creations. Fair enough. Yeah, that does track in my mind. The Architect City went through some iteration after its original concept turned out too floaty for a culture about construction and architecture. Yeah, I mean, I could see that. They want them kind of grounded and on Earth. If they make them a bit too fantastical and a bit too, let's say, high tech, they're not going to really feel like people that are grounded and doing the actual construction, right? Because these people are the people who are actually doing the construction. So they kind of need to feel like, I mean, to put this in World of Warcraft, I mean, I think this is the best example I can give, right? Like, you wouldn't want the architects to look like they're coming from Dalaran. Dalaran? The floating city from Warcraft, right? Because if they're coming from that city, they don't really feel like they're on the ground constructing, right? They don't want to seem like this magical city. Like, they are the builders, right? Then, in order to represent more than just that, we decided they should lean into the affinities, playing with them in interesting ways. There are many iterations, each more mind-boggling than the last. Well, maybe not each. I did scale down the mind-boggling sometimes, which this is very much I'm sure as I've been reading through this, you guys have been going like, oh, that's crazy. Oh, that's crazy. Oh, that's even crazier, right? So they probably needed to keep it at least a little bit toned down because it is just a culture. Like, you've still got all your tomes, you still got all that other stuff that you can add on top of it. So if they make this culture the craziest thing ever, then it's just going to be ramped up to like 11, and then it's going to be ramped up to 12 once you start putting all this other stuff on top of it, right? But eventually we settled on a relatively restrained take that keeps the overall balance intact. Like I say, the overall balance intact. So they definitely had some issues. I can imagine just reading through like this monument and stuff, they probably definitely had some problems making them outrageously overpowered. Yeah. Letting the player interact with affinities in new ways and gain power over time, eventually outscaling the opposition. Yeah, so they definitely seem to have this as a late game kind of scaling faction, but if you are going for a scaling faction, you can't just hide in your cities and win that way. This isn't like Magic the Gathering when an enemy has to kill you. An enemy can just sit in their base and win in their base, right? Well, I guess in Magic the Gathering, there are ways to just sort of do that, right? Like, there are win conditions like that. So you get the idea, right? In Magic the Gathering, it's more about defeating the opponent, not reaching the very rare win conditions you can do that don't interact with your opponent at all. I guess blue is great at not interacting with their opponent, but I'm getting a little bit off track. Monuments came together decently quickly. Wanted to represent the affinity in each stage visually. I'm particularly fond of the affinity icon being visible in the foundation. They're just showing some art here. They wanted to make the monuments look like the affinity they were doing. It's cool. It's neat. Conclusion. There's more to talk about still, but the powers that be decreed that it shall be spoken of in the next week. We shall go into detail of the units and spells available to the culture then. Thank you for reading. Okay, so this is definitely a lot to go over. I feel like I'm terrible at reading this. But yeah, no, I mean, these monuments giving you affinity is really strong. These monuments giving you damage is really strong. The fact that you can potentially have more than one completed monument. I mean, 2 completed monuments would be 16 single shot damage. So I'm wondering how hard these are going to be to make because, wow. Okay. I mean, it really depends also on how strong the faction is baseline. Because if the faction is really weak at game start and can't clear camps as easily and can't expand as easily, then they're definitely going to be playing from behind and they're going to need an advantage. It really depends on how weak they are baseline. So, we will have to see these units that they're using, or we'll have to see these spells that they're using in the early game. If they've got quite a powerful roster for the early game and can continue to expand in the early game, then yeah, that's obviously, little bit of a balance issue, right? But if they're very weak in the early game and then are about scaling, then that's going to add a new scaling culture in the game, which could be cool. But again, you do need to remember that win conditions take place in an enemy's base and you have to go in and stop them from winning. So you can't just sit in your city until you win by I don't even know, just reaching I'm the coolest factor, right? Like I've won so many Age of Wonders 4 games by just getting a win condition before my opponent, even though my opponent had more research, even though my opponent was out teching me. I reached my win condition and suddenly they're like, oh crap, like I have to play the game now. So we'll see what happens. I'm really interested to see what kind of units, and I'm really interested to see what kind of spells they have. But at least for now, the monuments look pretty interesting. These look pretty cool. And I guess we'll see what's happening with this one. But thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Make sure to leave me a comment on anything. This the first dev diary I've gone over. I'm not sure I did that great a job. I feel really dumb reading this stuff. But if you enjoyed watching it, make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, leave me a comment down, give me feedback, please. And as always, I hope you all have a great rest of your day.